Hello and a very good morning to all of you. My name is Kapil Khanna, and I'm a researcher here at Central Queensland University. So today's topic for the conference presentation that I had given to the chair, and I was lucky enough that my abstract got accepted, revolves around the concept around circular economy. So circular economy as a means of gaining competitive advantage opportunities for Australian SMEs. That is like basically the gist of my research. And before we delve into the topic for today, let me just begin by doing an acknowledgement of the country. So I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, and I also pay respect to all the elders past and present and emerging, and extend that request to the First Nations people of Australia. So, what is circular economy? That is very, very crucial for us to understand. So let me do a bit of an introduction as to where this concept is coming from the past, in terms of the earlier setup, which is actually quite prevalent even today. The linear economic model, which is revolves around taking something, making use of those raw materials to kind of construct some products, or maybe offer some services. And once those things have reached their end of life, then you kind of dispose them away, either in a landfill, or just not used anymore, as maybe sometimes even in e-waste, and ends up in some of those third world African countries. So we all understand, that the recent debate has been that this kind of approach is pretty unsustainable. So what has happened is that a recent trend, that there's a paradigm shift now towards more sustainable alternatives, like circular economy. So as the name suggests, circular economy is about circulating things back into the cycle of production. So it is based basically largely on three broad principles of reducing the consumption of virgin raw materials, reusing whatever we can, and recycling the waste. So although it sounds very simple, but the overall concept, when I started doing my research, was very clear that it's still in its nascent stage. So as I go ahead and discussing my research, you will see that I had to use a case study scenarios to try and understand how some of the companies have been able to or not able to adapt circular economy and been able to achieve any kind of a competitive advantage. So my focus was on SMEs, small and medium enterprises, specifically in Australia. So what I found out was that for SMEs who are trying to adopt circular economies, it can provide the principles, obviously, like I've just mentioned, the 3R, but there are a lot of principles and a lot of in-depth analysis that if anybody's interested in my research can, I would be happy to connect with you guys. So what it says is that adopting circular economies principles can provide a competitive advantage that can help achieve both profitable and sustainable outcomes. Now, these two terms sometimes are not often used in the same sentence. A lot of companies still believe that being sustainable is more like an expense than an investment. So that's what my challenge has been through my research. That can we show via case study analysis of certain SMEs in Australia that adopting circular economy, or for that matter, any sustainable alternatives, can also lead to profitable outcomes. So it's not only something that should be looked at as an expense. So this research basically focuses on identifying opportunities for SMEs to make such a transition towards circular economy. So my focus started from one of the brilliant researches done by Ribanti and Jono in 2021. So if you can see, this is adapted from their research only. So they kind of divided the circular economy principles into three broad categories. In the center sits the six core principles, and on the outer circle you'll see we have what you call as the values, for which the circular economy stands for. And then as happens in any business case, that although yes, it is good to know what values you stand for, what are the principles you're trying to achieve, but there needs to be certain enablers or drivers which can help you kind of implement those values, or those principles that you stand for. So again, in my research for today's presentation, I may not go too much into detail, but what I found out, and I'll show you in my summary in the end, is that waste elimination is one of the core principles of circular economy. That is, again, one of the biggest challenges we face these days. And then economic optimization, remember, it goes back to my topic about how do we balance sustainability with profitability. And then being conscious about the environment, and then maximizing the retained values. There are a lot of companies, which are doing a lot of good work in trying to make sure, to make that whatever is the, like, if you look at your mobile phones only for a simple matter, initially, you used to get those modular phones where you could literally take them apart and you could take out the gold or the silver or the glass from the screen or the battery cover, the plastic and everything, and then reuse it. But now we see, things have changed a bit. And I think we need to go back to the drawing board and see how we can, relive those principles that were so nicely adapted in the past years. So what was my research motivation? So what I found out, in a very surprising outcome was that SMEs, the small and medium enterprises, they are the key drivers of economic growth in Australia. So if you look at the stats, it's pretty an impressive number. They are the largest employers. They contribute more than half of the national GDP, and also make up 99.8% of all businesses in Australia. That is an amazing stats. And then it was very surprising for me then when I kind of started fiddling around a little bit and see, hey, is any work being done on small and medium enterprises again, especially in Australia? So I found out that there's a lack of research in identifying any sorts of opportunities or benefits for SMEs, especially when they want to look at circular economy as means to differentiate themselves, and in that process, again, gain sustainable and profitable outcomes. There was a lot of research on multinational corporations, big companies who have deep pockets, who can hire some researchers and say, hey, can you help us identify, that if we are going to switch over or transition to circular economy, what are the challenges and opportunities that we can realize? But with SMEs who have a limited amount of resources, we found that there's a dearth of research in that area. So that was my major motivation, knowing the fact that SMEs contribute more than half of the national GDP, almost 99.8% by definition of all businesses in Australia, and also provide lots of employment, generate lots of employment, and then nobody's talking about them. So what are the research objectives of my topic is to identify the current state of circular economy adoption in Australian SMEs, right? And then to further identify opportunities for SMEs to gain competitive advantage. So I keep using the word competitive advantage, and there are a lot of ways, companies can gain competitive advantage. Sustainability, kind of pitching to the stakeholders that, we are not a company which is only stands for making profits. We also care about the environment. We also care about the planet. We also care about the people who work for us. We are in an and model, not an and or model. So, so that's the main idea, that how can we use sustainable practices, sustainable ideology, sustainable principles like circular economy, and stand out from the crowd. How can we pitch ourselves as a responsible organization? That is the main idea behind when I keep using the term competitive advantage. So my research question was, and the topic was, how can the adoption of circular economy principles by Australian SMEs help them achieve competitive advantage? So what I did was that I kind of, obviously what I sent across was a very basic abstract of my research, but in-depth analysis was done using a research design principle around case study. So again, like I said, that circular economy is still in a very nascent stage. And the case study based research, as suggested by Yin in 2009, is very suitable for this kind of research, which is very novel. Like I said, because of the novelty of the sustainable benefits of circular economy and the ever evolving field of circular economy, adoption for SMEs, a case study based approach was chosen by me as an ideal proposition to understand two basic concepts as to how and why of circular economy. So how SMEs adapt circular economy principles. Are they able to adapt all the 6 core principles that were mentioned here? If I go back quickly and show you, so if you, I don't know how clear the picture is, or they just kind of cherry pick some of the principles that kind of help them, get the maximum advantage, knowing that they have limited amount of resources available to them. So how do they do it, and then why do they do it? Once they do it, they realize that this is how they can do it. What is the whole purpose? Are they able to identify any opportunities? Are they able to sell themselves as a responsible company, and in turn, obviously, try and get some benefits out of it also? So I use semi-structured interviews. Kind of approach certain SMEs in Australia and say, hey, this is my topic of research. We'd like to connect. And I was pretty surprised that a lot of SMEs, came back, and I kind of chose two SMEs for my research initially, and interviewed the CEOs, the founders of the organization. And the focus of those interviews were to understand how circular economy principles have been adopted in the business model of those SMEs, and whether such practice have resulted in them, finding any benefits for themselves. And again, to do a nutshell, just to kind of summarize everything in terms of what were the important outcomes that came out of those semi-structured interviews, was that the first thing I found out is that yes, they did find some benefits. They honestly speaking were not able to adapt all of the core principles based on the fact in which industry they were working in. Some principles were able to yield them maximum results. Some principles, they said, there's no point trying to achieve it, because again, the industry does not have impact on those areas. So I think it was a sensible approach, because what they wanted was that let's try and get the maximum benefits, but yes, knowing that we are limited in our resources. So some of the important outcomes were that technology is the enabler. Every SME that I talked to said that they really, really rely on latest technology to help them minimize the cost of transitioning to circular economy. So that was a very important finding. And data is the key. So they said that, again, for them to be able to translate all the efforts they were putting in, they needed the physical data, that okay, a kind of a transition, that okay, we started at point A, we adopted certain circular economy principles, we let them run for say 6 months or a year time, and what was the result. So the data is the key, and they needed data not only from what they were doing within themselves, but also from industry bodies, from the government and everything, to find out that what everybody else is doing. So it was kind of a learning curve for them. So data, generating data, physical data, which can really point out the facts and figures rather than just theory, was a very important factor that came out of my discussions. And again, one of the most important things that I found out was that recycling is not a solution. Designing for recycling is. Now, this is very interesting. And again, those of you who would like to connect later with me, sorry, I will not be able to be there for the live Q&A, because I'm sending this across as a recording, because some of the time that was allocated to me clashes with my lectures at a university. So sorry about that. But again, I'm open to any discussions later. So recycling is not a solution. Designing for recycling is. So what I found out was that sometimes recycling can be actually more resource intensive than designing a fresh new product, right? So that was pretty surprising. Customer education to change their perception of secondhand products, again, very important. SMEs, especially those who are making certain products, found out that they do want to be responsible, they do want to adapt those principles, they do want to refurbish, reuse, recycle some of their products, but the customer perception towards second-hand goods is still very, what shall I say, negative. They believe that the second-hand goods, recycled goods, are not necessarily of good quality. So sending across those messages that, and educating those customers towards the quality and guaranteeing those quality is a very important part, because again, this is directly linked to profitable outcomes for the SMEs. Support from the government, very, very crucial. Some of the time I found out that some SMEs were not really keen on jumping onto the bandwagon of circular economy, because they found that the policies, procedures, some of the paperwork was sometimes very, very tedious, especially in Australia. They found out that some of the laws related to biosecurity, environmental protection, everything can actually be deterrent also sometimes, because it's very, very complex. And also that's directly linked to ease of implementation. So if there is a government support, there's a lack of there's more support in terms of providing subsidies, providing tax holidays, ensuring that that companies are not bogged down into signing those reading those lengthy policies, procedures, and getting messed up into some legal hassles. So if that can be eased out a bit, then again we found that circular economy principles can be of big use to small and medium enterprises in particular. So what are my research impacts? Basically, I can divide it into two broad categories: managerial impacts and theoretical impacts. So managerial impact is basically my research identified opportunities which can motivate other SMEs also to take a more positive outlook towards circular economy transitions, and also adapt circular economy principles for relevant to their industry that can yield maximum benefits. Like I said, I kept pointing out that it has to be specific to an industry. All circular economy principles cannot be universally adapted across industries. From theory perspective, this is my future perspective, which I'm also encouraging other researchers if they want to jump into it. The success of this project can ensure and encourage future scholars also take more sector specific and country specific approach. Like I said, my research is broadly across two or three different sectors. And like I said, it's only Australian specific SMEs. So the future research agenda could be sector and more country specific. And we can also, I'm also motivated to use theories like NRBV, which is the natural resource-based view theory, and dynamic capabilities theories for furthering the research and, kind of giving it a solid theoretical base from the research. So overall, to sum it up, transitioning to a circular economy model is a challenge for SMEs, which have limited resources and organization constraints. In Australia in particular, SMEs generate a lot of job opportunities and contribute to a large percentage of the national GDP. To meet the socioeconomic goals in this highly unpredictable and changing environment, a transition to circular economy strategies is needed for small and medium enterprises. This research study outcomes will enable SMEs to strategically align their business practices with circular economy principles, as I said, overall to achieve social, economic, and environment benefits, and become more profitable while trying to be more sustainable also. So thank you so much for paying attention. And like I said, this is a recording, and I hope I'm looking forward to the eGrad school at QUT to play this on my allocated time slot. And in any case, anybody wants to connect later with me, I would be happy to really share some of their viewpoints and maybe carry some research further. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of the conference for today. And thank you, QUT, for providing me with this amazing platform.